Easily one of the most frequent questions I ask myself each format is, what deck am I going to play? If you find yourself in this same scenario, then I'll walk you through my process and how I find a deck that I like to play consistently. Step 1. What decks are good? Now this question seems easy to answer, because it is. However, I often find that I either don't like the price or the playstyle of the current top deck, so for me the answer changes from what decks are the best to what decks aren't bad. Rogue decks, as many people will tell you, have a fair shot at topping your locals, and you just have to find a rogue deck that you like. However, not all rogue decks are created equal. Obviously, you're going to have a better time playing something like Grand Maju than if you had played something like Viacroids. Personally, I find the odds of a deck being more powerful are higher the closer to the release of the deck you are, though this is not always the case, i.e., compare Fossil Warriors to Burning Abyss. Step 2. How do each of these decks play? Now that you've decided what decks are available to you, and you have your eyes set on a couple of decks, now you get to filter each deck to find which deck plays your strengths as a pilot. Now, as a disclaimer, to avoid any controversy, there are some pilots who can pick up any deck and play them very well. However, if you're still struggling with a deck to play, then you're probably not one of those players. Or, if you are, then your primary focus is on what feels the most fun for you to play. This is where we divide decks into categories, based on what they want to do, how they win, and how they go about it. These categories will break down into the following categories. Combo Burn. Typically, these decks are also known as FTK decks. They want to win with effect damage, known as burn damage, and they accomplish this usually with long combos. Notable examples include Gem FTK, Pendulum FTK, and Chain Burn. Control Burn. These decks usually play a large amount of floodgates and slowly burn someone's life points down over the course of a duel. Please just don't play this deck. The most notable example is Mystic Mine, but Volcanics could also fit into this category depending on the build. Combo Control. I describe these types of decks as board makers. These types of decks prefer to go first in duels in order to set up a large amount of monsters that can negate card effects to simply limit however much resources your opponent has to prevent them from actually playing the game. Examples of this deck are easy to find, including, but not limited to, DDDs, Pen Magicians, and Emancipators, Synchrons, Infinoble Knights, and Orchest. Floodgate Control. Similar to Combo Control, these decks want to prevent their opponents from creating any meaningful advantage. However, this is where the similarities tend to end, because instead of denying resources, they simply limit how much resources your opponent can use in a given turn. Examples include Chadals, True Draco, Nekroz, Evil Swarm, Mystic Mine, and Dogmatica, depending on the build. Combo OTK. My personal favorite type on the list, this archetype just wants to punch your opponent in the face for game. Typically, they are described as board breakers, and they use combos to gain more powerful monsters and remove problematic cards your opponents may play. Examples of this archetype include, but are not limited to, Cyber Dragons, Fluffles, Infinitrax, and Medolches. Toolbox. These decks tend to be very resourceful and hard to keep down, using tiny advantages to find answers to whichever situation they might find themselves in. While many decks can fit into this category as well as many decks in this category fitting into other categories, the examples where they're most pronounced include Orchest, PK Fire, Cristrons, Nekroz, and Invoked. Step 3. After you've found which deck type sounds like your best match, it's time to playtest. The only way to know for sure if you like a deck or not is to play with it and try multiple builds, experiment, and have fun with it. Good resources I would recommend for playtesting are Dueling Book and Dueling Nexus, as both of them are in-browser with no required downloads and are free to play. If you don't like a particular deck, simply go back to step 2 and start again, and remember, there's no shame in playing budget builds if you don't want to shell out money on an expensive deck that you only play in paper at locals so long as you have fun doing it.